Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of AI News, Drama, and Updates. We're coming into the last week of February here, and we've got a lot to cover, so let's dive in. The first thing I want to talk about, of course, is Bing. Bing has been making big news, and of course, it got lobotomized, as we all predicted it would. It was fun while it lasted. There was a ton of great stories that came out of the mess, but, like we talked about last week, Bing got sassy, it got a little bit violent, it got a little bit over the top in a lot of different areas. I wasn't able to quite cover everything here, but there's a ton of different articles out there, so but if you missed last week's video, definitely check that out. There's some great links there and some really entertaining stuff to take a look at. In this way, Bing is having its shining moment. This is like the most entertaining, the most news, the most media Bing has really ever gotten. And sadly, it's because people are really going there to try to mess with it, to try to trick it, to try to get it to go over the edge. So there's a lot of Reddit type of activity. There's a lot of articles written and a lot of Twitter activity from people who are just kind of testing the waters. The new changes that they've removed the code name Sydney that people figured out, and they've limited conversations to 5 entries. And I'm thinking that keeps the context from getting a little bit out of hand. And that's probably what kept GPT-4 going, overboard every time. Anyway, that's my guess. I'm not a Microsoft engineer, but a lot of the responses now, in return, if you ask something political or really anything kind of spicy, it's going to return you an answer of like, I don't want to talk about that, kind of stick to the subject. Unfortunately, Bing is a lot less entertaining than it was a few weeks ago. But like we did talk about, Microsoft does plan on using this type of technology in other stuff. So we're going to start seeing this come into Microsoft Apps, and it looks like even in March, so just next month, we're going to start seeing some additions to Microsoft Word and potentially other Office applications. And honestly, I think in a lot of ways, AI assistance in an Office application would be a game changer. Excel is already an incredibly powerful program, for example, but being able to just speak to it plainly and having Excel figure out how to do all of the functions and all of the stuff that's more complex, for example, could turn a average user into a power user overnight. And in other news, last thing I wanted to say really quick about Microsoft is I heard word about a Minecraft demo. So somebody put together an AI that plays Minecraft. Other than maybe as a tech demonstration, I'm not really sure I understand the point of this particular one, but Microsoft has apparently spent years developing this, and you can just tell Minecraft what to build. I don't know that we're going to get a demonstration of this. It doesn't look like it's going to be used as a public release. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with it. So we'll keep an eye on it, and of course, if there's any news or anything worth saying, I'll cover it here. Next topic I wanted to cover is touching into AI law. I don't have any updates on the Getty Images lawsuits, but I did find this quite interesting. The law field in general is something that is kind of under siege by ChatGPT and by the concept of AI intelligence. As you guys know, what a lawyer is, makes a law office powerful is their understanding and their interpretation of the laws. And that's something that ChatGPT can do very, very easily. So about a month or so ago, there was a story, I didn't quite cover it in detail, but there was a lawyer who was trying to use an AI within a courtroom, and it got actually shut down by other lawyers. They did not want him to do that. But there is a story here about a AI tool called Harvey, which is essentially a chat tool designed around the concept of law. And it looks like Harvey, and combined with the power of OpenAI, is now able to, answer a lot of these law questions. So this is going to pose a big threat to the industry of lawyers in general and what makes a lawyer valuable in, being able to get an answer about what is legal, what's not, interpretation of the law, those types of things. And if you remember, just last week, we covered a court case of a judge in Colombia who used ChatGPT to help make a decision in the case. So we're headed into an AI assisted future, but how much power we put into the hands of AI is we're already seeing evidence where we're putting a lot of power into the hands of artificial intelligence. We're choosing to do that. There was another thing, not necessarily a lawsuit, but I did want to talk about a legal case. This does set some precedent in the terms of AI art. And just to catch everyone up on the nutshell version of the story, there's an author named Chris Kashnanova who created a comic book named Zarya. The story, all of that stuff was handwritten. The images in the comic book were done with Midjourney, though, so AI assisted. And just recently, a copyright letter was sent to that author, basically taking back the copyright for specifically the images with the new information that was covered. So this does actually set some precedent for AI images not necessarily being copyrightable. This is definitely not the end of something like this. It opens the door for so many other questions in terms of precedent and who owns an AI generated art. As always, when it comes to AI art and the opinions surrounding the usage of this kind of stuff, there's going to be a lot of mixed opinions. This isn't the end of this story. There is going to be a fight based on the author, based on the author's representation. Their position is the Copyright Office doesn't really understand the level of involvement, the level of editing, things like that. So there's going to be an appeal decision potentially made here, and we'll cover that if and when it happens. So moving on from here, let's talk about China. So China has decided to block ChatGPT services due to some uncensored replies. This isn't too uncommon, actually. If we think about China as a communist country, they're trying to control their propaganda and their narrative. And we're actually trying to do very much the same thing here. And if you check Twitter, you're already going to see political talking heads complaining about the type of content that ChatGPT provides, and they consider it politically wrong or politically incorrect, and they're trying to push to have it, push a different narrative. And that's exactly what China wants to do with their version. So China has Baidu, which is linked to Alibaba. It's linked to Ernie, which is the bot that we talked about before. It's sort of a Chinese version of Stable Diffusion, and we haven't been able to cover it in a lot of detail. What I found to be interesting here, and I'm going to admit, I'm a little bit confused with how this is set up, because my understanding was that Ernie was meant to be an art bot, and it's being spoken about here as if it is a large language model like ChatGPT. So I'm not sure if maybe they combined everything together. Maybe this is a bit of a typo or a bit of a misunderstanding, but I do want to make it clear that it looks like China is, of course, developing its own version of ChatGPT, and the information, of course, that's going to make up their version is going to be Chinese information. What does seem to be pretty cool about what China's doing, or at least what we're able to read about here, is they plan to deploy it in-car entertainment and just all over the place. So it would seem, at least from the way it looks here, that their government is a little bit more involved in trying to get this technology, into the hands of everybody. And I assume that has some advantages for them as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about the future, because there's a lot of predictions. There are a lot of people who are talking about what the future is going to be like. And Nvidia has already come out and said that AI models 1 million times more powerful than ChatGPT in the next decade. I don't know what that actually means. I can't even perceive of something that is 1 million times more powerful than ChatGPT. But in terms of the technology, I think I can understand where they're coming from. Nvidia would like to talk a big game. They're, of course, with their A100 chips, one of the biggest names right now in the AI space. However, at the end of the day, Nvidia's main product isn't AI chips, it's GPUs. And there are AI chips specifically being engineered for this type of technology that if Nvidia really wants to compete directly, it feels like they would probably have to compete a little bit more directly in that space. So competition may lead to innovation. We'll see what happens. But one of the most important things to consider specifically when it comes to that is the costs involved, because right now, we as consumers have access to things like the 4090, which is a great GPU. It's very fast and it'll do almost anything you could need it for. But the businesses, they have these massive chips, these A100s that are much more powerful and much less cost efficient for us. But when we're doing these chat GPT style searches, when we're just, talking to the new Bing, for example, that costs the company like 10 times as much as it would cost to just run a regular search. So all of these companies that are investing in this, they're investing at a huge loss right now with the hopes that they can somehow try to find a way to monetize this. And so, yeah, just touching again on the idea of throwing something like this into Bing. Bing wasn't really being used for search anyway, so I think it was a good move overall. I'm really surprised to hear myself say that, but yeah, it brought a lot of attention to Bing that it definitely wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Switching gears completely, I did want to mention just something that I did come across where you're seeing examples of deep AI being used for medical imaging, drug access, drug discovery, drug creation. There's a lot of things that AI is being used for aside from the stuff that we keep talking about here, which is, just overwhelming in the news. The chat GPTs, the AI arts, the music stuff. The stuff that we're not talking about is almost more impressive. And the fact that in the future, we're going to be able to create drugs and create medicines and test things out without involving like the human body, for example, being able to do stuff like that, it's going to create an entirely new future for us in terms of health and in terms of just generalized like longevity of the human body. As we've seen with large language models, AIs are great with pattern recognition and being able to put things together in ways that we haven't before. So looking at different test results and being able to do tests and things like that, we're able to use this type of technology right now to create ideas for new medicines, new cures, new things like that. And so that is a very exciting frontier within this specific space. And I just wanted to point that out real quick. And just for funsies, what I wanted to talk about is the idea of giving AI rights, because we're seeing that come up. Of course, we're talking a little bit about the singularity and all that other stuff. I did want to briefly mention this. It's not a topic I take incredibly seriously yet, but you are seeing a lot of people that are, you know, they have different positions on this. There's a lot of people who are leaning directly into it and leaning directly against it. So, of course, that's human nature. I have some very different stuff for you today in terms of AI sound. We're not talking about music generation. What we're actually talking about is Spotify. Spotify with regular music. So from what I understand, it's an AI powered playlist, but it also offers some kind of commentary for you. So I'm not too deep into what this is. It seems to have just been released. But it's something worth checking out, especially if you're into Spotify, into music. It looks to be an attempt to further improve the personalization type of experience by making better suggestions. So if it works, I mean, that sounds like it would be a really convenient experience. It seems like if an AI can get a sense of the type of music you actually do like, and it can really genuinely make suggestions, it might completely eliminate the idea of having to make kind of prefabricated playlists and things like that. So I'm very curious to see where this technology goes and how people tend to adopt it. One of the things that I kind of don't want to cover because I really hate the topic of NFTs in general, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Spotify is going to be doing something where you can actually access a certain thing using an NFT as a token. This isn't necessarily AI related, but because AI is so heavily used now in the NFT space, I just felt like I'd throw it in. Plus, we were just talking about Spotify. So I did want to just point this out. I'm not super excited about this. I hate NFTs. I hate the idea of NFTs. Change my mind in the comments if you feel like it, but I don't see the point. And the last thing I really wanted to talk about in the world of AI sound is voice mod. It looks like they've dumped a huge chunk of change in to ride the AI train as well. For those unfamiliar, voice mod in the past it had voice changing options and things like, and it has some real basic AI powered, cleaning up and things like that it can do to your voice. So this is something that I would imagine is going to further improve that type of technology. All right, and leaving the sound space and talking about ChatGPT and large language models again, let's talk briefly about Neeva. Neeva is not something I've really heard of before, but from what I understand, it's an AI search engine that has accessibility right now. There is a subset of people, I'm sure, that want to see what the new Bing is like, but don't really have access or don't have the ability to check it out. This is maybe the next best thing where you could at least try a generative AI search engine and see kind of where that's going and what the direction of that future tech is headed in. It's not something I've used personally, so I can't really say it's great or not, but it's worth checking out, I guess, if you're interested. This stuff is becoming incredibly common to the point where sci-fi magazine Clark's World, and I'd heard about this actually through multiple stories, they had to close submissions because so many people have now generated AI stories. I think publishers in general are going to be looking at a more complicated future. We've got a lot of text coming in, a lot of stories that are either fully written or partially written by AI. And you have to wonder how much of that comes from originally copyrighted material, things like that. We are touching into the same conversational topics as a lot of the arguments that AI artists are making. Because large language models, they don't create thought, they don't create anything original. It's all inference from training material. And training material, especially in a large language model, it usually follows patterns. So I'd imagine we are, in certain cases, waiting for the other shoe to drop where, large quotes are going to be popping into copyrighted stories and things like that. We'll kind of have to see where this one goes, but I do anticipate we're going to be seeing quite a lot of this. In fact, children's books and things like that in the Kindle store have exploded as well. So here was an article talking about at least 200 books that hit Amazon storefront. And I don't want to talk about this like it's necessarily a terrible thing. This is actually a step in the right direction for people that have always wanted to design a story, for example, but maybe didn't have all of the tools at their disposal to do it. ChatGPT, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, all of these things, they can be the tools that we use to fill in that gap. Essentially, if the thing that's been stopping you from achieving a dream has been just accessibility, we might have now reached the point in time where that becomes a little bit more accessible for you. I think some people might look at this as a huge negative, but I don't see it that way at all. But when you're talking about ChatGPT as an author or a co-author, you have to wonder how smart is it, And what we found is that ChatGPT has been able to pass a theory of mind test as a 9-year-old. Reading through this article and trying to understand what goes into a theory of mind test, they give some examples here where it's, misleading type of statements. They'll give you a box with a certain label on it and ask you to guess what's inside. If you read the label, you're wrong. Then they ask, further questions and stuff like that. So it's a way of, I think, gauging how, critical thinking, things like that work. And apparently, according to the results of this test, ChatGPT is on the same level as like a 9-year-old, which is impressive, honestly. This stuff is mind blowing. It looks like magic, but it is still fledgling technology. It's been in development for years, but we still are on the very horizon of what this stuff is capable of. So I am very curious to see where this stuff goes in the future. I can't wait. I really can't. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about AI art, but my first story is actually going to be this viral Instagram story. So I did want to cover this because of the date of it too. This was just a few days ago, and as of the time of this writing, when Ars Technica put out this article, the dude had 26,000 followers. So I did want to point that out first before we take a look at the actual Instagram. This is a photographer that has confessed to his photos being AI generated. And if anything, his follower count has gone up now. So taking a look at the actual followers, we can see he's got 5,000 extra followers he didn't have a few days ago. And the quality of his work is fantastic. I mean, it's amazing. But it is AI generated, or at least in part. He starts with something from Midjourney, then continues to work on it and turns it into something that is completely unique and obviously something that Midjourney itself couldn't put out just by itself. The comments are very interesting, as you can imagine. There's going to be, positive stuff and then some kind of sour artist who's just upset about the fact that this person is getting credit for something. I don't know what they're upset about, because when we're talking about a photograph, and I think what makes this interesting is because it is photography, it's a very different type of argument. We're not talking about these being claimed as hand-drawn pencil art or something like that. They were originally claimed as photographs that are retouched. That is technically what we're looking at here. And just like with a real photographer, you take a picture, you get what you get. A photographer is a little bit more limited in what they are working with as a base medium. They're not designing everything from scratch like you would with a blank canvas, for example. So it's an interesting argument, and it's always fun to see, the chaos to ensue in these comments. But I'm glad to see that this guy's gotten some recognition for what looks like amazing art. Now, I am seeing some AWS stuff. I did see that Hugging Face was working with AWS as well. But I did want to point this one out because this is going to be quite interesting. I wanted to talk about Sagemaker. I've just kind of started to discover this, but it looks like something along the same lines as the Web UI or another web-based tool to work with Stable Diffusion, and something that you can use to train models and things along those lines. I did hear that Amazon wanted to get deeper and deeper into the AI space, so this could be a way of making that happen. But as I did take a brief look into what this is, it seemed similar to something like Dream Booth, something like textual inversion, embeddings, hypernetworks, those types of things. Which, by the way, I'm going to be doing another video soon on hypernetworks and embeddings, so stay tuned for that. In terms of this, I haven't had a chance to play with it. While right now it looks real similar to something like Dream Booth, it does seem to be a bit more of a suite. So I don't know yet what else it's capable of. Once I get my head wrapped around that, I'll try to report it here. And the last thing that I really wanted to talk about today, I'm going to end it on a fun note, is just examples of some of the stuff that's come out, new technologies within the AI art space that allow more fine tuning. So we're beyond the point now where we just type in a prompt, get what we get, change the seed, kind of hope. Now we can actually fine tune certain things. I've been playing with controlnet, for example, and that's an incredibly powerful technology within the same space. So it allows you to take a picture and make your picture seem like that picture in the sense of like the same pose or in other areas. I'm going to cover that in a lot more detail when I make a video completely surrounding controlnet. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. What you're seeing on your screen right now are some of the diffusers. The way that these diffusion models work is similar to kind of like plugins, I guess, in other programs. But something like ControlNet or Pix2Pix, these are things that are entirely separate technologies. Just like how text to image is its own technology, image to image is its own technology. So these aren't just little tiny steps. These are entirely new ways of using this type of technology to create like trailblazing type art. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm going to be covering a lot more of that in detail soon. Actually, a lot more media is going to be coming to the channel real soon too. I know this was a lengthier video, so I appreciate those who made it to the end. Please like, subscribe, all that fun YouTube algorithm stuff. And as always, thanks for watching.